Hello, welcome again to YouTube into the second video on how to create a data figure. In the first video, we configured most of the parts of this graph of the data figure. In this present video, we'll finish configuring this and also see how we'll transfer some of the text into this part of the graph. We're going to configure this graph, create the labels, and also draw the significant differences which are here. So let's get started. So I'm done with these numbers here. The last thing which is left to be done here is to write this label. So I'm going to grab any of these numbers, take Ctrl D to duplicate it, pull it by the side, and then highlight it just like we did before and write the text sporozoids. I select and pull by the side again to see better. Use the text tool to position in there, space, and we want a forward slash, and we want to write microliters, which is a Greek letter. So to do that, we'll go to text, glyphs, and down here we want to select Greek or Coptic, and the font family will be Arial. And then here we have the possibility to search for our Greek letter. So here is mu. I select it and then go append, and we're having it occurring here. And in this case, it's changed the size of the font, but it's no problem. We can adjust this later on. I close this, then write L for liters, and then blood. Then we can select all of this, and then go down here, select a font size of 9, and then go to Arial, enter. After doing this, we use the selection tool, select the text, click on it again a second time, and now we have this handle which we can grab, and holding the Ctrl key down, we can now position it. We go and delete this text and then pull this to sit in place. We want it to be 1 millimeter away from the figures. The next thing we want to do is to verify whether this is centralized. So to do that, we're going to pull a guideline up here and put it right to the end of this axis approximately, and then pull another guide and put it right here at the origin. And in this case, it's not particularly exact because we have our grid tampering with the position of the lines. But if you want to be exact, you go to View and Page Grid to take away the page grid, and now we can hold this guide and pull it to sit right on top of there, and this one below, and pull it to sit right here. So right now we can use the Bezier tool, click on it, come here, click on it to get the first node, hold the Ctrl key down, pull it right down, and when you are at this other guideline below, it shows you double click to release, and here we have a line which is the same dimension like this. We now can use our trick of align and distribute by selecting this line, holding the shift key down, selecting this text, and then going to object, align and distribute, and we want this to be on the same vertical axis. And now the text is fully aligned with this axis. When using this hyperline, we'll notice at times that in aligning and distributing, it shifts a little bit away from the guide. No problem. You select this one and then hold the shift key to select text, and then holding the Ctrl key down, you can shift both below and it's going to snap on the guide. Right now you notice that your text is fully aligned with this axis. After using such a helper line, you can click on it and delete it. Using helper lines like we've used here can be used either vertically or horizontally. So we call back our grid and then pull away the guidelines which are not necessary, like this one and this one and this one. And right now we notice that our graph is way off our target. So based on what specifications the journal wants, it may either be that if we reduce the font size of the text, we're going to come in there, or it may be that we may have to reduce the distance between the bars. So looking at all of it, we'll see that it is sitting here above this initial guideline which we produced. We'll take away this guide, which we use to shorten this axis so that we know exactly the dimensions we're working with. If we were to select all of this by taking the selection tool and then pressing the left mouse button down and pulling above all of the object, and then using the arrows on the right side of your keyboard, we move to fit the column, we notice that everything sits in well. And here we have our figure, and it is sitting in here from this guide to this guide, which corresponds to have a column. So I'm going to close this one here, and we'll go ahead and do the same thing on this graph. The first thing I'm going to do is going to remove the component parts by selecting and then going to Object, Ungroup, Object, Ungroup several times, Object, Ungroup, Object, Ungroup. And after ungrouping, just like before, we notice this background which is behind. We can delete it. And this text here is of no use for us. We can also delete it. And I'm going ahead now to change the colors just like we did before. And I'm going to come back to you. So I've just configured this graph just like we did with this one before, changing the colors, the offset, and shortening this axis to be about 2 millimeters from the end of this column. Now we're going to put the text. The first thing we want to do is to highlight all of the graph by clicking and pulling to select, and then shifting the graph so that it comes to the end of this guide. Now we're going to hold all of these texts and delete them. So first we can select the text by holding the mouse key down and pulling over the text to select everything and then hit delete. We leave this text down here as a guide for later on, or we leave it to the side. And same thing, we could select all of this text below here and then hit delete. To carry over all of this text here, what we do is we just select them and then take Ctrl D to duplicate. Use the right arrow head key on the right side of your keyboard and shift it to go to the right. And we want it to be somewhere around there, just about 1 millimeter from the text, just like here before. And we notice already that the space here is a little bit small, but we'll fix all of that later on. Same, we come down here and then we select this by holding the mouse key down and pulling over it, taking Ctrl Z and then shifting it to sit just below there. If we want, we can use the guidelines to control how well our text are sitting. The advantage of taking Ctrl D is that when you take it, the distance from this to the text is exactly the same when you pull the text over. The next thing we're going to do will be to zoom in again further, and in certain cases we'll notice that this part of our graphs are bumping down here. We can fix that if we wish, and what we do to fix it is to select the tweak tool and then select the graph, and we have these nodes coming up. We hold the Control key down and select with the tweak tool and pull this to fit. But right now we notice that it could fit anywhere, so to guide the process, what we do is we pull a guideline to sit just on the axis. And if we have the grid disturbing us, we go again to view page grid, we take it off, and then we are pulling this guideline to sit just on the line. So this is now on the x-axis. Now using this tweak tool again, we click on this and we're going to have these two nodes coming up. We hold the Control key down, press the left mouse key to select the two nodes, and then we bump it up to the line. It's going to snap on our guide. So we now see that compared to this one is not bumpy. We go ahead and repeat this for every other bar by selecting, highlighting, and then bumping it up. Same for this, selecting, highlighting, bumping it up, And same for this, selecting, highlighting, and bumping it up. I'll do this for this graph and then I'll come back to you. So we now have fixed the bumps that were below here. We're going to zoom again so we see everything. And right now we could go again and call the grids if we wish. We still have this text here which we have to select and delete when we've transferred its information here. So we're going to write this, and in this case I'm going to just select the text tool, go in there, highlight, and then write in histamine, and we want the units to be microgram, and we have our micron sign there, so put gram per mil. We then can use the selection tool to select this text, hold the shift key down, select this text, and then go to object, align and distribute, and center on the same horizontal axis. This way this text stays in the middle. Click by the side to release, close this, and delete this text. So our half column started here at 18 and ended here at 107 millimeters, making a length of 89 millimeters. Then we have the midpoint of that, which is 62.5 millimeters. I'm going to delete this guideline, which can stand on the way. We now notice that our two graphs are somewhat overlapping, and what we want to do now, I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and I want to pull a guideline to be 1.5 millimeters from this midpoint, and pull another guideline to be 1.5 millimeters from this midpoint. Then I'm going to zoom, and right now we can select all of this, and then holding the control key down, we pull it to fit. And we notice again that our grid is on the way, so we go to view and take off the grid. So we are now holding the handle here and pulling this to fit in there. And this can be quite tricky at times because it will want to fit on the original line. This is the one reason why it is advantageous at times to work with layers. So what I'm going to do is going to select that, delete it, and then hold this handle and then try to fit there. If it doesn't come from this direction, you want to try some other directions, like from below, and you figure out how it's going to work one way or the other. And right now we have our graph sitting in there. We'll do the same thing for this one by selecting, grab the handle and the control key down so that we don't skew our graph, and then try to bring it. And right now this one sits in well, so we pull it down by still holding the control key and pulling it to sit on this line. Same here, we select, hold the control key and pulling it to sit on the line. And this way we now have our two graphs side by side with the right kind of information we need. The next thing we'll want to do will be to label whether they are A or B. And in this case, we're going to go to view, call the page grid back, and then 2 millimeters away from the text, we can place our label. We select the text tool and then go here and write A. We now can highlight this and then take a font size of say 14. This will vary from journal to journal, but once you do it in vector graphic, it's easy for the journal to adjust. So highlight that, and then using the arrow key, you pull it down to sit 2 millimeters away. 2 millimeters may be so close, and you may want to take 3 millimeters away from the text. So we align this also to sit with this label, and then we can select this and then take Ctrl D and take it to the next, and also align it to sit here. And we now can use the text tool to rewrite this as B. If we think this is sitting so close, we just can go here, use the selection tool, select the tool, and then go one step up or one step down based on the way we want it to be. So the last thing we're going to do to wrap up is going to show how to indicate significance on the graph. For that, I'll pull a guideline here and place on this column. So for that, I'm going to select the Bezier tool, go to the top of the bar where the handle intersects on the grid. I click, hold the Control key down, go one square up, click, go to the right, click, go one square down, double click, and I release. Then I use the selection tool, and now I see this is not exactly aligning with the bar. So I'm going to take the grid so that it doesn't stay on the way. I go here to view again, and then page grid, and use a guideline to align with the middle of the bar. And then I use the tweak tool, select this, highlight these two nodes, hold the Control key down, and I pull it to align with the line. I take this guideline here to the next bar, use the tweak tool, same way, click, highlight those two nodes, hold the Control key down, and pull to align with the line. So this way, this bar is sitting exactly on top of both columns. I can take away the guideline if I do not need it, and then we can duplicate one of these texts and then go up here and put the kind of significance which we want to put. Let's say we put in 3 asterisks to show that this is p less than 0.001, and we fix that to sit in position. And you can basically go ahead and reproduce this for all of the other graphs where you have significances. To do it for the control and this next bar, what I'm going to do is going to highlight this one and then take Ctrl D to duplicate and then pull it a little down or pull it a little up to be above this present one, and then I'm gonna delete the superfluous stuff that is come there, and I notice there's a little bit skew here, so I quickly delete this and select the whole of this again, duplicate to have that, and I'm going to pull a guideline to sit on top of this bar. And right now I can use the tweak tool, select that, select the nodes, and then pull to sit there, and then use the selection tool and pull the significance mark to go further. So we've now indicated our significance mark for the graphs. The one thing we did was to scale down both graphs, and when we do that, we have to be careful that the scaling was okay for both graphs. And one way to quickly check it is to pull the guideline and just go on top of the axis and see how far the other axis is. And when we do this, you'll notice that the two graphs were differentially scaled. And this is because this one has not been scaled right up to this guideline. So this is something I built in just to let you know what sort of errors can pop up. So to correct that, what we'll do is to go to the selection tool and then select this graph again. And in this case, we may want to keep away the significance signs up. So we go select and then holding the Control key down, try to pull it so that it snaps with that line, and then we check this right side too that it snaps. There you go. So once that is done, we appreciate it, we select and then pull it down to sit. I use this guideline here and pull my significance marks to sit in line with what is in the first graph. I pull back the guideline, and the last thing we want to do is to go ahead and verify what font size we have here. We are now having 8.5, which is perfectly in line, all through 8.5. And if this will have changed significantly from what the journal wants, it will make sense to go back and correct the font size. The other thing we could do is also to check on the size of the lines. So once you've checked everything and they're okay, we will now go to the selection tool and we group the graphs. We group this one too. I must say that I previously grouped this one separately. Now we can select this graph and then go to Object, Fill and Stroke, and then Stroke Style, and see what size it is. So here we had it at 1 point, and equally I could go here now and highlight this one and put it at 1 point. I close this If you've done your graph based on the way the publishers want them to be, the font size, the size of the lines, and every other thing, you now can group all of it. Go to Object, Group. Now we can take away superfluous guidelines like this, and then we zoom to see everything. We now have our graph here and it's sitting to the side of the page. Assuming we want to have it right in the middle of the page here, what we'll do will be to use the old trick before. We're going to pull guidelines from up there to sit with this bleed guide, pull another one from there to sit with this bleed guide, and then we are going to use the Bezier tool to create a guideline from top to bottom. Double click, and then we select that line and hold the shift key down, select our graph, and then go again to Object, Align and Distribute, and then we center this on this axis, on the horizontal axis. We can delete this line if we don't need it again, and we delete the guides. Same way, we can use the Bezier tool by creating another line here by clicking there and then holding the Control key down, coming here, double clicking to create a line, select it, and then Shift, select our graph, and then now we want to center on a vertical axis, and then we can take away our guide. This way, if we take away all guidelines, or if we just go here to View and Guides, taking them away, we're going to have our figure sitting there in the middle. If we take it to a zoom of, say, 200, we now see our beautiful figure. Take it a little bit down. This was a fair example of how you can create scientific data figures using graphs you've produced in some dedicated programs. Thank you for watching my video. I hope it's going to help you. Please do not forget to leave a comment below. I look forward to see you in the next video.